Welcome to the Reasonable Southerner podcast. The South isn't all magnolias in the moonlight, but neither is it all racism and violence. We are just like you. My name is Frances Coleman. I share my insights about my life and yours. I want to tug at your conscience, but first I want to talk about dollars, cents, public policy, and a septuagenarian governor who speaks the language of her people. Alabama has a problem that it can no longer ignore, although it has tried mightily to do so. 2 years ago, a federal investigation revealed to the world the shameful truth that our state prisons are dens of horror, where inmates are stabbed, murdered, raped, and tormented to such a degree that the Justice Department said the prisons violate the Constitution's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Some of the guards try to do a good job, investigators said, but others participate in the mayhem, assaulting prisoners, selling drugs, and looking the other way as inmates brutalize one another. Overall, the guards are too few in number and too poorly trained to control the prisons, and that allows drugs, weapons, and violence to flourish. To an Alabama corrections officer, a good day is a day that he or she is not assaulted by inmates. If you are not horrified by the stories and photographs that have been published in the national news media since then, detailing the conditions in our prisons, then at least be horrified by the prospect of the feds taking over our prison system. Instead of spending untold amounts of money trying to fend them off, we could be spending money on new prisons to replace the outdated and overcrowded ones that we have. We could be revising sentencing guidelines. We could be recruiting more guards and paying better salaries. We could be acknowledging the truth about incarceration, that it's crucial to public safety and that it's expensive. The Vera Institute of Justice, a nonprofit national research and policy organization, estimates that Alabama spends nearly $15,000 a year per inmate it incarcerates. That's why, as we speak, the Alabama legislature is meeting in special session to come up with a plan to replace the state's aging facilities and also to incorporate better treatment facilities for mental and physical illnesses, plus create rehabilitation and education services. The lawmakers were called to Montgomery by Governor Kay Ivey to consider $1.3 billion worth of legislation that, for starters, will fund the construction of 2 new 4,000-bed prisons. Those new prisons will allow the state to close 4 smaller ones. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of money, and that's because it is a lot of money. But the existing prisons are in such bad shape, according to the legislator who's sponsoring the bills, that the Alabama Department of Corrections spends more than $40 million a year on overtime for employees because, quote, we can't hire enough employees to go into those dilapidated buildings that we have. Folks, that is just pathetic. Besides building some new prisons, Alabama could take some additional steps. For example, in addition to upgrading facilities and personnel, we could imprison fewer people by distinguishing between serious and lesser crimes and sentencing accordingly. We could also divert nonviolent criminals to lower security facilities. Frankly, these aren't new ideas. More than 20 years ago, the state legislature created the Alabama Sentencing Commission, whose goals were and are to collect information from across the country and then to make recommendations to state leaders about sentencing, probation, prison overcrowding, and related matters. Just in case you worry that our leaders are going soft on crime and softer on criminals, and that we might waste money on rehab and education, think about this. Given that most prisoners eventually will return to our communities, which is smarter? To attempt some sort of rehabilitation while housing them in decent facilities, or to sanction beatings, rapes, and other brutality, and then release them to be monsters among us? Even setting aside the specter of federal intervention, you know the answer. So does Alabama Governor Kay Ivey, the nation's oldest serving governor. Looking at the 76-year-old white-haired woman, you could be tempted to dismiss her as somebody's sweet old grandma who accidentally stumbled into the governor's office. That would be a mistake. After a distinguished career in banking, Ivey entered into public service and politics, where she has been for more than 40 years, serving multiple terms as state treasurer and lieutenant governor until taking over in 2017 for the disgraced former governor Robert Bentley. She was elected governor in 2018, and if she wants to run again in 2022, she'll probably win re-election. She is no country bumpkin from Wilcox County, Alabama. Kay Ivey will tell you that she gets Alabama's prison problem. And after the Justice Department issued its report, she pointedly added that she is intent on, quote, making certain that this Alabama problem has an Alabama solution. Now, if you speak Alabama, you know that Ivey was telling her constituents, who have historically resisted and despised federal intervention, that Alabamians, not the feds, will drive this bus. Sadly, previous governors' Alabama solution has been to dodge, delay, and thwart the federal government. This governor, however, appears to be intent on getting the job done. Again, this is not your typical sweet old grandma. Early in her tenure as governor, she managed to sign into law a gas tax increase that few observers believed would clear the legislature. And despite the noisy anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers, she stood firm in the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic when it came to requiring masks in schools and places of business. The fact that Ivey has the legislature on board for prison reform is impressive and really nothing short of amazing. So you can see that Alabama is at a special place wherein its leaders, who have been struggling with this issue for decades, may at long last actually get the job done. All of that said, now let me have a go at your conscience. It is morally wrong to turn a blind eye to the fact that our prisons are cesspools of violence, and that, in essence, the state of Alabama, that's us, remember, sanctions torture. I am not suggesting that we coddle people who committed murder, robbery, or other terrible crimes. I am suggesting that we remove them from society and incarcerate them in secure facilities, in prisons, not hellholes. In a state whose residents, or a majority of them, claim to be God-fearing and Bible-believing, is it too much to ask that we treat prisoners humanely? Lest we forget, Jesus had a special place in his heart for them. For the love of heaven, as well as for the love of responsible public policy, we have got to do better than we are doing now. We have got to live up to our responsibility, both civil and moral, to get this legislation done. I'm Frances Coleman. I've worked for newspapers for more than 45 years, from Texas to my native Louisiana, and finally to my home near Mobile, Alabama. I've been a reporter, an editorial writer, a columnist, and an editorial page editor. I've commented on the BBC, been a guest on the Rachel Maddow Show, and had my column distributed nationwide. If you like this podcast, please follow it. It's free, and even if you don't like it, I hope you'll find it thought-provoking.